we're on very thin ice. We're making promises that over the long term, I don't think we can honor. A friend of mine said it very well to me last night. He said, "What is our staying power?" I don't think we have much staying power. We have the appearance of power. If you look at something like the Depression, during the Depression, we made a lot of mistakes. We were no better off in 1938, 39 than we were when it began. We pursued all the wrong policies, but we had something going for us. We defaulted twice. We call it restructuring the debt in 34 and 36. Now, why were we able to do that? We had the largest manufacturing base in the world. We had the largest skilled labor force in the world. We had infinite natural resources. People said, well, look, the Americans are having trouble. They're not doing very well, but they'll come out of this. They're worth the risk. Meanwhile, we demanded repayment for the war debt from World War I, from Britain and France and everybody else, in gold. And so gold was pouring into the U.S. Treasury. What have we got now? We are no longer the largest manufacturing base. China is the largest manufacturing base. We're not even close.
Grand Rising kings and queens from Africa and across the ocean, I thank you so much for tuning in, and I send you love to every black soul rising in this time of truth. Now, today we deal with something that the system doesn't want you to hear. A white American colonel whose name is Douglas McGregor, he is retired commander, has opened his mouth and confirmed what many of us already know. What is that? That America is falling, and the aftermath will shake the world. Okay, so this is not coming from a prophet in Africa. This is not coming from a black activist in America. This is coming from their own military insiders. He is warning that the empire is unsustainable, just like Britain's was in 1947. And let me tell you, when this colonel admits what we have been saying, it means what? It means that the cracks are getting bigger. The cracks are too big to hide anymore. And that's what we are going to talk about, because America today runs on debt, financed power, debt, financed living, debt, financed prosperity, and everything. So from its military bases to its so-called high standard of living is funded by borrowing. That means it is an illusion of power, not a real power. Let's watch this clip from Colonel McGregor, and then we come back with more commentary.
In the United States of debt-financed power, debt-financed consumption, debt-financed living, standards of living, prosperity, all of that falls apart. Well, then all of a sudden you wake up and you say, I'm sorry, but I can't afford to maintain those troops in your corridor. I'm sorry, but I can't afford to maintain all the troops that are sitting in Poland. Have we ever seen this happen before? Yes. It happened in 1947 when the British Empire fell apart. It fell apart because the debt to GDP ratio was 240%. And the British simply said, we can't afford to stay in India. So this thing, India, was what we fought, or they thought World War II and World War I to protect. Stop and consider that. That's where their focus was. What are we protecting other than just Israel? We're protecting a larger financial empire that is bound up with those banking systems that I mentioned earlier. It's bound up with access to critical oil and gas reserves. It's bound up with containing BRICS, which is represented primarily by Russia, China, now increasingly India, Saudi Arabia, all these other countries. So we're on very thin ice. We're making promises that over the long term, I don't think we can honor. A friend of mine said it very well to me last night. He said, what is our staying power? I don't think we have much staying power. We have the appearance of power. If you look at something like the Depression, during the Depression, we made a lot of mistakes. We were no better off in 1938, 39 than we were when it began. We pursued all the wrong policies, but we had something going for us. We defaulted twice. We call it restructuring the debt in 34 and 36. Now, why were we able to do that? We had the largest manufacturing base in the world. We had the largest skilled labor force in the world. We had infinite natural resources. People said, well, look, the Americans are having trouble. They're not doing very well, but they'll come out of this. They're worth the risk. Meanwhile, we demanded repayment for the war debt from World War I, from Britain and France and everybody else in gold. And so gold was pouring into the US Treasury. What have we got now? We are no longer the largest manufacturing base. China is the largest manufacturing base. We're not even close. Our skilled labor force, when we examined the potential to build a factory that could produce the very, very exotic, complex microchips that now the world depends upon from Taiwan, the owner of the factory privately told us, you don't have the human capital to do the job. Our education has fallen apart. Our skills are simply not there. Now you put all of that together and ask yourselves, why would you ever, sitting in the Caucasus, make yourself so seriously dependent upon the United States or in Europe or anywhere else? I don't think I would. And I keep trying to tell people, I love my country. Don't get me wrong. I want my country to be successful. What I'm trying to tell you is that we want you to be successful too. And you're on the wrong path. And that takes us back to where do you want to go in the Caucasus? And you're in a tough position. You only have a few options. India clearly is one, Russia is the other, and so is Iran. Now, once you move beyond that, what are we going to do for you? I think the answer to your question is for the United States to play the kind of role it should play, given the fact that Americans live in the Western Hemisphere and everybody else you described lives in Eurasia in the Eastern Hemisphere. Now, what do I mean by that? We have no sense of what our interests are. You've asked a very critical question. What about the commercial interests of U.S. companies? Well, if you're frank and honest and open about that, we have an interest in doing business with everyone. And instead of doing business with everyone on the assumption that somehow or another, if we do that, it would be bad for us and help China, help Russia, help the One Belt, One Road initiative, we've decided to launch tariff wars. And our launching plan has been scattered. We've simply punished everybody within range without thinking carefully about the consequences. So what are we doing now? Well, we're trying to step back. We're trying to recoil from what we set out to do to begin with, because we're finding that the tariffs aren't helping us in the least. They're actually quite damaging. I don't know how that's going to go, but I think if you said, what are America's core interests? Our core interests are not to destroy Iran, not to harm China, not to undermine or subvert Russia, not to create greater Israel, to subjugate the entire Muslim world to Israeli dominance, to capture and dominate oil and gas fields in the Middle East so that they can profit in London and New York City. I think our interest is in simply doing business with everybody, being no one's enemy. But that's, again, a minority opinion, but it's one that I've held throughout most of my life. The first question I ask always is, how does it help us to fight X, whoever that is? Are we benefiting from making new enemies? Are we benefiting from harming anyone? You know, we have an unfortunate habit in this country of cheering every time there's a bombing somewhere. Stupid people, stupid Americans think, oh, there's evidence for our greatness and our dominance. We're bombing people. Then you try to grab somebody and said, you know, we're bombing people that have no air defenses. We're bombing people with practically no armed forces. How does this help us? How does this make us great? And they sort of look at you, really? They have no idea what they're doing. The press, the media has become the sort of purveyor of things. They write the narrative before it happens. They tell you what the outcome should be before you even know where you're going. So you've got these other forces in charge. Now that's the first thing. So my answer, frankly, is we should not be involved in that corridor at all. We should try to do business with everybody who is. We should encourage everybody to find a way through it. But that's not what we're doing. We're taking sides. And that goes back to Israel. Do you really think that we would give a damn who went through that corridor, who owned or policed that corridor, if it were not for Israel and now our desire to harm Russia and Iran? I don't think so. I don't think we'd be there. All right? So now what happens in Alaska? And I think we have to understand something. President Trump wants Alaska to produce what you saw with Aliyev and Pashinyan. That's what he wants. He wants to stand there, hold up a document, smile ear to ear, you know, this is my great moment. He's into the optics. He wants a quote unquote win. A win to him is, well, the American people saw it. It's great. And then we get on the plane and fly home and the hell with it. I'm serious. I think the greatest risk is, frankly, to Trump, that he will look ridiculous, that he will walk away with nothing because he doesn't have a grasp of what's really going on. If you listen to him, he is being fed the same lies that you can read in the Western media. Oh, the Russians are weak. The Russians are not strong. They have lost millions of people. This is a catastrophe, on and on and on. That's all nonsense. It's actually the opposite. What is being said about Russia is true for this catastrophe called Ukraine, led by this man Zelensky and this crew. So the danger for him is that he gets nothing. He's got nothing to really offer. And then he doesn't do anything. What he should do, if he can't get an agreement, is that he should come out and say, look, I've done all that I can do. It's not going to work. And so I have made the decision at this moment to essentially distance ourselves from Ukraine. It is up to the Ukrainians and the Europeans to come to a resolution of this crisis. So I am withdrawing all U.S. military and civilian personnel from Ukraine. I am immediately suspending all military aid to Ukraine. I'm pulling out. This is no longer something that we are obligated to solve. This is a matter for the Europeans. Thank you very much. Goodbye. That's what he ought to do. Now, one thing he could do on the side is at least tell President Putin, look, we'd like to come to some sort of arrangement on nuclear weapons. We recognize that we were hasty in abandoning the Intermediate Nuclear Force Treaty, the INF. We've been hasty on a number of other issues. We want to get back to business on that. I can't conceive of any reason why at this particular stage, Putin, number one, would believe anything we said. It's very important to understand that. We accuse him of lying all the time. He's never lied about a damn thing. He's always stuck to his guns. He's told us exactly what he wants, exactly what Russia desires. We have refused to recognize the legitimate national security interests of Russia. And that's wrong. Okay. The second thing is, I think the Russians also understand that they can't depend upon any signed agreement. Let us say we sign up for the Austrian state treaty model for rump Ukraine, whatever that turns out to be. How's it going to be enforced? Who's going to live up to it? You see, when they signed that treaty with Austria in 1955, President Eisenhower absolutely guaranteed that he would support that treaty. And he committed us to it. And we withdrew everything. And we stayed north of the Austrian border inside Germany. And we did that consistently throughout the entire Cold War. But that was Eisenhower. Eisenhower had a lot of credibility. They believed Eisenhower. They had every reason to believe him because they dealt with him during the Second World War. There's no reason for the Russians to trust anything we say. So I think the best that President Trump can do is hold this meeting, come out and say we both gained a better understanding of each other's position, and we agreed to press forward with a resumption of discussions about how to moderate the nuclear matter, how to restrain it, how to work it. But I am now convinced that the only way forward is for the Europeans and the Ukrainian government to reach some sort of resolution with Russia. Let me tell you, if you did that, people in London and Paris and Berlin would have a heart attack because they're not prepared for that. Everything they're doing is designed to drag us in. Regional focus to this original question about Gaza, which I think is accurate. It's a mistake to view what's happening inside Israel as in isolation from or divorced from everything else happening in the region. The Israelis, and I pointed to the banking interests in London and New York City, and now, unfortunately, from a U.S. perspective, what Washington thinks its interest has to also include the impact on Iran, Russia, as well as the Turks. And the entire region is in a state of turmoil right now by design. The whole design behind the destruction of Syria was to leave Syria in a state where it could be dominated by two principal parties. You could say three because we too have a hand in it, but it's really Israeli and Turkish with American backing. And we've decided, for whatever reason, to back this Turkish-Israeli hegemony, at least temporarily. That's why I always like to make the point that the arrangements between the Turks and the Israelis right now is very similar to the Nazi-Soviet pact. It's a matter of convenience. It doesn't necessarily mean that the two groups are in love with each other. Far from it. But they happen to have goals and objectives that coincide. We've decided to underwrite those because we have also decided that we want to continue to encircle Russia, put pressure on Russia, and ultimately destroy Russia, as well as putting pressure on dividing and destroying Iran. Now, I don't think these are American objectives. In fact, I'm going to let you move forward to the tenets of the agreement. I think this is really all about the interests of the Israelis and their fellow travelers in Washington, New York City, and London in the larger region, with absolutely no concern whatsoever for the impact on the people that live in the region. They simply want to bring down Russia. They want to bring down Iran. Why? Well, they see Iran as being the repository of all this oil and gas. Now, their efforts to bring down Russia thus far have failed. So I think they're willing to sort of take a temporary step backwards. But they're going to double down now on Iran without question. And they have aligned themselves as a result with both Turkey and Israel. That's what you're looking at. And we've helped to create that catastrophe because we've worked closely with Israel to make it happen, and to a lesser extent with the Turks. I mean, you never have anybody that stands up and says, well, who stood up ISIS? What was ISIS originally designed to do? Well, it was stood up in large part by very wealthy Arabs, peninsular Arabs in the Saudi Arabia and the Emirates, as well as by Erdogan. And Erdogan provided the intelligence. Erdogan provided access to oil and the oil markets. Now, Erdogan wanted them to attack and destroy the Shiites in Iraq. Nobody ever brings that up. Then we come in to rescue the situation in Iraq, and we worked closely with the Shiites. This man, Soleimani, that we were so anxious to murder, was instrumental as an ally. He helped to liberate Christian villages and towns and districts from ISIS. We worked with the man. He delivered to a large extent, and back in 2007, 2008, the support and the cooperation of the Shiites in Iraq with us so that we could stand around and pretend that we had had some success there. My point is, we don't know what we're doing. We're just taking orders from foreign powers, foreign influence. And that influence right now is largely Israeli, in isolation from what Israel wants. Israel wants a platform for attack based in Azerbaijan. It's very important to Israel. It likes the fact that the Kurds who are allied with them are at least as anti-Iranian as they are anti-Turkish. I'm talking about the Kurds in Syria. So this is part of a longer corridor. If I were going to rename the whole thing as the Trump disaster zone, I would start down with the Druze, work my way up through the Kurds, right up to the Turkish border, where you have this sort of de facto independent Syrian Kurdish state. And then I would look at the Jelani state, which is essentially ISIS dressed up in a suit. And that is obedient to the orders largely of Turkey, but it also responds to MI6 and Mossad, even more than it responds to us. And then finally, you reach, Azerbaijan, that little enclave that then links through the corridor up to Azerbaijan. Now, what is that designed to do? We're encircling Iran. We're encircling Russia. We're splitting Iran away from Russia. And we are also interrupting the desire to have this one belt, one road that runs from the Indian Ocean all the way up through the Caucasus and potentially into Eastern Europe. So all of this is somehow or another combined and linked. Is this part of a grand strategy? I think it is. But it's a grand strategy that was developed largely in Israel secondarily in New York City and London. It's not Donald Trump's grand strategy. Donald Trump loves optics. Donald Trump likes to be photographed smiling ear to ear and being congratulated by everyone. He loves having things named after himself. That's really what Donald Trump is about in this particular setting. Now, the bad news is, and this is very bad news in my judgment for us, and I'm talking about the Americans, he's committed to the use of American military power in that corridor. He's moved in and said, we will now supplant the Russians who were previously expected to help staff and run that corridor with Americans. Again, now this is music to the ears of everyone in Israel, New York City, and London. But to the average American who doesn't really appreciate what that means, it's very dangerous because we are overstretched as it is. If you want to go back and look at this phrase, imperial overstretch, we've long since surpassed it. We're beyond imperial overstretch, and we're on the verge of bankruptcy. Remember, having failed to sell our debt effectively to very many people in the world, this is the bond market, we've now turned to T-bills. I don't know all the details of that particular pact that was signed, the strategic partnership between Iran and Russia. And there may be some secret protocols that were agreed that we just don't know about. But I think it's part and parcel of the One Belt, One Road, the larger BRICS operation. All of those things are inextricably intertwined with relations between Russia and Iran. Iran is a very critical partner in that whole process. So I think the answer to the other two questions is, under those circumstances, I do not think the Russians will stand by and allow us or anybody else to pulverize Iran out of existence. Now, having said that, I think the Israelis got an education. They grossly underestimated the Iranians. They would be very mistaken to do so again in the near future.
Welcome back. Now, Colonel McGregor compares America to Britain after World War II. After World War II, Britain's empire collapsed because its debt to GDP ratio hit 240%. And they simply couldn't afford to keep India. Okay? The mighty empire that ruled the sun never sets suddenly had to admit that they are broke. And that's what Colonel is trying to explain here about America. And I have said, the very, very day you are seeing the white people are starting to admit, the white professors, white great thinkers, white politicians starting to admit that America is falling, that means what? That means the crack is bigger. And this is to say that America is reaching that same point that Britain was in 1942. Okay? And not 1942, it's 1947. Now, troops in Poland, troops in Middle East, bases all over the world, it's unsustainable. Okay? And when the money runs out, America will retreat. Okay? That means what? That is the beginning of the aftermath. The colonel asked, what is America protecting right now? And the truth is, America is not defending freedom. America is not protecting democracy. America is not protecting human rights. America is protecting a financial empire tied to Western banks, critical oil and gas reserves they can't let go of, containment of BRICS. Because let's say, BRICS is giving America a lot of pressure. BRICS contain of Russia, China, India, Saudi Arabia, and more. These countries, South Africa, Brazil. It is giving America pressure. And this is the real battlefield that is going on. Not justice, not freedom, but control of money, control of energy, control of power, and to remain in influence. So when USA loses grip, the empire collapses, okay? And this McGregor says that America has only the appearance of power. So staying power is different. Staying power means that you have manufacturing strength. Staying in power means that you have natural resources. Staying in power means that you have the ability to recover from mistakes. For example, in 1930s, America faced a Great Depression. America had all that Great Depression. Even when they defaulted on debt in 1934 and 1936, the world still trusted America because it had industry. It had workers. Black people are still working on the farms, And it had gold back then. So it was trusted to come back stronger. But today, America has none of that. Why? Number one, when you talk about the manpower, black people are leaving. Black people, like right now, black Americans have opened their mind. They have started their own business. They have started their own, influence. So black Americans are not there to work on the farms. Number two, China right now is the manufacturing base. The US can't even build advanced microchip because it lacks the skilled workers. Natural resources are no longer abundant. Okay? Gold isn't flowing in. So the illusion is breaking. So right now, unlike 1934, America has nothing to protect. America does not have the power to come back, because when you look at America right now and you see black people who they influence the country are no longer interested for that. What black Americans are interested in is moving back to the motherland. So my family, this is not just about white Americans' decline. It's about black people worldwide. So when the empire falls, the chains on Africa loosen. When America retreats, it will no longer be able to control African leaders. It will no longer be able to dictate trade or to use the dollar to enslave our African economy, you know? Now, black Americans too will see the truth. When the system falls, when America falls, black Americans' eyes are starting to open. Right now, black Americans, they are seeing clearly. They are seeing that they were lied about Africa. They are seeing that they were told lies about the growth of Africa and everything, okay? So the system that enslaved their ancestors is collapsing under its own weight. And this is a time of awakening, a time of opportunity, okay? When Britain collapsed in 1947, it pulled out of India because Britain was the country that colonized India. So that opened the door for independence movements across Africa and Asia, okay? Yes, it was messy. The West still middled, but the empire's decline gave colonized nations breathing space, okay? And the same thing is coming with America, okay? As its empire falls, Africa must be ready. And we are always ready. We must rise. We must unite. I tell my people, we are strong. We have the younger generation. Why? Our generation average is like 19 years, 25 years. Youth. So we are capable. We have the strength. We have capable of building, innovating, thinking. You know, young people can just sit somewhere and think for 2 days what to do. Think for 1 month. Think for 1 year what to do. And then boom, you rise. Like older generation, for example, in America, it is 45 years, if I'm not wrong. In Japan, it's like they are aged generation or aged groups. So you cannot waste 1 year of thinking. Right now in Africa, a youth can take 1 year just partying. After 1 year, he thinks, oh, I need to open a club, you know, because you have the time with you. And that is what Africa has. And that's why white Americans or white people or white systems, they are panicking because of the population that is in Africa. And Bill Gates said that he wanted to reduce the population in Africa, you know, just because of panic, okay? So Africa is ready. We must be ready because the falling of America, it's giving Africa a chance to skyrocket. Notice how the Colonel McGregor connects America decline with BRICS. He admits that the US is desperate to contain Russia, is desperate to contain China, and now India, and now Saudi Arabia, Brazil. So these nations represent a multipolar world where America is no longer the sole superpower, okay? And this is why Africa joining BRICS is powerful. It means that Africa stepping into the new system. And let me tell you, it's not Africa joining BRICS. Some people are taking Africa as a whole. As Africa has countries. Right now, Africa is in BRICS, and we are looking forward for Kenya, we are looking forward for Ethiopia, we're looking forward for Egypt to go into BRICS. So when African countries join BRICS, it will be so much powerful. That means the African continent will be stepping in a new system, a system that is not controlled by Washington, a system that is not controlled by London, you know. And this white colonial warning is really a confirmation that the West fears BRICS because they know it signals their end. Brothers, I heard him mentioning something about microchip. Think about this. The world depends on Taiwan for advanced chips. I never knew that, by the way. The world depends on Taiwan? On chips? Wow. I need to learn more about history. I didn't know about this, by the way. So America wanted to build factories, but it was told that you don't have the human capital. Imagine that. Imagine that, okay? The self-proclaimed greatest country in the world lacks the skilled people to run its own factories. Why? Because they were depending on black people. They were depending on black Americans. And right now, black Americans are no longer working on their interest. What will they do? Compare this to the 1930s when America had the best workforce in the world. And today they are consumers, not producers. Today they are borrowers, not builders. And this is why the aftermath of American collapsing will be brutal. Those years back then in 1930s, I wasn't there. I don't know what went on there, but I'm guessing that according to history, the workforce of America was strong because of black people. Okay? Now, when America falls, the world shifts. Europe will be exposed. Without US protection, Europe will face its own crisis. Africa will be targeted, okay? Because it holds the resources the West needs to survive. Black people must choose. Will they depend on a dying empire or build their own future? So the aftermath of American falling, it is dangerous. It is very dangerous, okay? And I'll say this, apart from being dangerous, but it is liberating to black people. It is liberating to Africa, okay? Understand this. Empire fall by design, okay? Nothing lasts forever. For example, Babylon fell, Rome fell, Britain fell, and America will fall too. It is doing that. And even white professors, even white thinkers, great thinkers, scholars, they have admitted that America is going down because the age limit is up. A lot of countries, a lot of empires has not spent more than 250 years. So America is on the limit. That's what we need to know. And it is written in prophecy that the nations who enslaved to colonize a nation that were oppressors or a nation that oppressed will collapse under the weight of their sins. A nation that is soaked by the blood of black people, it will collapse within, because it is watery, soaked in blood. Our ancestors are crying. The tears of our ancestors is soaking America and it is going down. As black people, we cannot sit back. Africa must build manufacturing. Africans must unite. Black people must unite. Africa must train skilled labor. Africans must unite across borders, must protect its resources. That's what we should do. Now, there's a myth here. America brags about having the most powerful military in the world. They speak of aircraft carriers, nuclear submarines. They speak of, it's called what? These heavy bombs and high-tech weapons. But you know what? This colonel said himself that he reveals the truth that all of this strength is built on borrowed money. Think about that. A military financed by debt cannot last forever. During Britain's decline, it still had ships, weapons, and bases. But once the money drips up, they couldn't pay to maintain them. They had to pack up and leave colonies, Even worse, America is losing wars in Iraq. Wars in Iraq was a failure. War in Afghanistan was a failure. It ended in humiliation. Libya is chaos. Syria resisted. Yemen resisted. And now Ukraine is exposing the limits of USA. Some things we need to talk, So the illusion of strength hides the reality of decline in America. And one of the strongest warnings hidden in these white colonial words is that about the financial empire. The US military is not just protecting land and oil, it is protecting the dollar system. For decades, the US forced the world to trade in dollars. Even pounds is higher than dollar, but they forced the countries to trade in dollars, especially oil, okay? And that's what kept their economy strong. You know that. But right now, BRICS is building an alternative. Nations are trading in their own currencies. Even US allies like Saudi Arabia are dealing with China in yuan, okay? In yuan, not in dollar. And the colonel knows the dollar's throne is shaking right now. I know that too. I have seen it. Dollar, it is shaking. It's going down. And when the dollar falls, America falls with it. Because power is money. We cannot lie. Power can be military, but that military is powered by money. You cannot have a good military base. You cannot have the strongest artilleries without money. Okay? And this is why US right now is so much desperate. They threaten wars. They threaten sanctions, coups and propaganda just to keep the dollar rise, just to keep the dollar alive. But history shows that no currency lasts forever. The pound collapsed when Britain fell, and the dollar will collapse as America fails. And McGregor have talked too about the false prophecy to allies. And he asked this question, what is America staying power? He said his friend asked him, and he doubts America can honor the promises it makes to allies. And he's right. Europe depends on America for defense. You know that. You saw the other day, France President Macron was, respecting. But when the US can no longer pay the NATO troops, Europe will stand exposed. Poland, Germany, and others are not ready to face Russia without US backing. And that means that Europe is standing on a sinking sand too. Israel too is propped up by US, support billions in aid, weapons, and political cover come from Washington. But if America collapses, Israel faces a future it cannot handle alone. And that's why McGregor asked, other than Israel, what are we protecting? What is America protecting? And his words reveal how fragile the empire is. Now, we must ask this. Why is white colonel like Douglas McGregor speaking the truth? It is simple. It's because even with American elite, some see the collapse coming. They cannot ignore reality anymore. When insiders speak, it means that the system is cracking. And these are not outsiders of revolutionaries. These are men who benefited from the empire. When they admit decline, it confirms what oppressed people have long known. It also shows panic within the system, and some are warning to prepare, others are in denial, but all can see the empire is falling apart. And America without manufacturing is nothing. Yes, America cannot even produce the most critical technology of our time, the microchips. Imagine the shame. A superpower that cannot manufacture its own lifeline. During the 20th century, America was the factory of the world. Cars, steel, planes, weapons, all came from US, factories that was real power. But the greed of capitalism sent those jobs overseas. And now China builds while America consumes. So without manufacturing, a nation cannot recover from crisis. It becomes dependent on others. And dependency is weakness. America decline is not financial. It is industrial, technology. It is cultural, okay? And America lacks the human capital to build. The skilled labor force that once defined the US has been replaced with a consumer culture. And this is a hidden crisis. Nations rises not just on money. We have to understand that, but on people. And that's why when enslaved Africans were working for America, America was booming. Its economy was high, okay? Skilled workers, disciplined builders, visionary thinkers, that is what is powering a greatness country. That word is sustaining greatness. And America lost that. They produce more influencers than engineers, more entertainers than scientists. And that's what is eating the America. So the aftermath of America is a lot. When you start to think about the falling of America and the aftermath, it's a lot. And when the people from within, the insiders, start talking about this fall of America, it is serious. So this is not a threat to black people. This is a threat to the white systems. It's a threat to the white America. Why? Because white Americans lived their whole years being lied to that they have this privilege, but there is no privilege. There is no privilege. Okay? Black people have endured it all. Black people have gone through hell. Black people have gone through this for a number of years. And I will say, America is falling. And if they don't go back to the drawing board, they will face an aftermath so harsh, so harsh. Tell me what you think in the comment section about this video. Until next episode, peace out.